Hi, my name is Damien and today I'm here to talk about my UIUX Presentation Part 2 for Annihilate the Anathema. So my target audience are teenagers around the ages of 16 to 25, and they are people who enjoy card games and strategy games as well as collecting story elements. So for the genre and the unique selling points of my game, the genre of Annihilate the Anathema consists of mainly fantasy, card-based strategy, and some elements of RPG and dungeon crawling. The game references for these are Slay the Spire, Shadowverse, Hearthstone, and Yu-Gi-Oh! And the unique point of the game is the ability to collect story cards from enemies that you've defeated. And using those story cards, you can unlock special attack cards once you finish the entire story. And players can equip these attack cards for future runs into the dungeons. For the lo-fi visuals, I've used some placeholder assets that I've made or drawn quite quickly in order to give the players a quick overview of what the game is supposed to be like. So this is what a start screen would look like without any colors. This is the basics of what a player select screen would be. This is the basics of the map, and this is what a typical battle scene in the lo-fi would look like. As you can see, you have your player, your health bar, your energy counter up there, as well as all your cards that you can select and the enemies. And this will be the lo-fi Adobe XD overview. So for the elements that I've decided to go for in this, as you can see, the potions were at the bottom, so that when players are looking through the cards that they have available for use, they will be able to take stock of everything they have at their disposal. And when the cards are played, they'll move to the center of the screen here. So when the cards are being played, players will be drawn to look more at the energy counter, so that they have a better understanding of how much energy is left, what other kind of cards they can use before they run out of energy and the turn has to end. So while doing the playtest videos, I have several comments about the pause menu being missing, the health bars being hard to see, and the overall UI looks very bland due to the lack of color. And there is no access to viewing how many cards you have in your deck, and there's no actual desk screen, or about how the UI looks very clunky. So for the Lendes, for the lo-fi, the layout was a bit confusing due to the lack of all of the UI elements. Only a few of them were present at the time. And once the UI elements were explained, players were able to adapt quite quickly and learn the controls quite quickly as well. For the memorability, the controls are rather simple, and so the players feedback to me that they were able to memorize them rather easily. But the players actually made several severe errors, mainly due to the missing UI elements and the fact that they were not very sure where to click in order to get certain effects. So the overall feeling of the UI was not very pleasant. So the problems faced in the lo-fi, as I've stated just now, are the lack of overall color, the lack of aesthetic, very bland and clunky looking UI, as well as several missing UI elements. So for the hi-fi, I've actually colored in all of the menu elements, and I have given it a bit more of its own aesthetic using the color schemes. As you can see, there's a bit of a theme of bones happening. So there's actually a proper select character button and menu element now. The map has also gotten a slight upgrade, so it looks more like an ancient map that players would see in maybe other fantasy kinds of games with old-fashioned maps. And the biggest revamp would be to the battle scenes. As you can see, the potions were given a slight revamp. The cards remained roughly the same, although they were also touched up a little bit. And I've just given the overall UI, I made it slightly brighter to fit in more with the dungeon-esque look. And again, there's a theme of bones going on, as you can see from the top of the screen. There's what looks like a giant skeleton just like looking down, gripping the top of the bar. So the health bars are also enlarged so that players are able to see them better. And the pause button is being implemented, and the next button is also being implemented. And this will be the rewards screen, where after players defeat an enemy, they'll see the rewards they can get, like the shield cards, potions of healing, and maybe a story card if they're lucky. And this is the death scene that was missing in the lo-fi element. So there's actually a back to menu button that was there, and the overall look is just to give this sense of dreariness for the player, because they have essentially lost their run. So this would be the Hi-Fi Adobe XD overview of all the slides of the scenes. And during the playtest, players actually feedback to me that the pause menu still doesn't have really any real use at the moment because the card list and story card list had yet to be implemented. So all of them basically feedback to me that the cards cannot be viewed and there is no real use for the pause menu at the moment. So for the LMS for Hi-Fi, after changes to the UI, the players were able to a lot more easily identify and learn the controls. They were also able to perform tasks quicker because they now knew where everything was. And the players commented that the controls were easy to get a hold of and hard to forget. So the memorability was rather good. Player errors were few and far between, and mainly they happened because the players clicked on the wrong cards instead of the ones that they wanted to click on. And the feedback I got was that the new UI is a lot better to look at, a lot more pleasant to use. So the biggest problem faced in the Hi-Fi version was that the pause menu had no real use, and I was missing the card list and story card list, which I added into the final version. As you can see, this is the card list, which basically is just a pop-up menu which will display all of the cards that the player has in the deck and can use. And this will be the story card list. This is story card number 4, which you saw just now from the rewards screen that was collected. So there are several story cards that can be collected, and the player is able to just slowly scroll through whichever ones of them has been collected. And if they have collected a complete story card, it will only show the attack card instead of all of the missing elements. So this will be the final Adobe XD overview for my final clickable prototype. And that is all. Thank you for your attention. This will be my references, and the Adobe XD link to the clickable Hi-Fi prototype will be here.